Hello guys. It's Aaron Recap. Today, let's talk about an American sci-fi film called The Invisible Man, which was released in 1933. On one heavy snowy night, a stranger, Jack Griffin's face swathed in bandages, body covered from head to toe and his eyes obscured by dark goggles, approaches an inn-named Lion, where a large number of people enjoying the night with games and drinks. He asks the inn owners Herbert Hall a place to stay, which they tend to refuse, but allows later anyway. Mrs. Jenny Hall, the innkeeper's wife, arrange a cozy room for the stranger. He asks her dinner, which Jenny serves soon after. He then demands everyone to not enter his room. But as she goes down, she had to make a second trip to the room, because the clumsy maid has forgot to deliver the mustard with the tray before. But as soon as she enters the room, she was horrified to see the stranger, missing his under jawline area. She serves the mustard and goes back to inn and tells everyone what she saw. Later in a countryside house, where a large room, now turned to a laboratory, Dr. Cranley works on his experiment. As her daughter Flora Cranley, Jack's fiancée, enters the room telling about her fiancé's sudden absence with great distraught. Dr. Cranley tries to comfort her, and asks her to not worry about Jack's whereabouts as he on his way to carry out the experiment. Unhappy with her father's response, she leaves her father sobbing. Then Jack's colleague, Arthur Kemp, enters her room, asking for her hand in marriage as Jack may never return, due to his sudden absence. Devastated by this conversation, Flora asks Kemp to leave her alone. A week has passed by and Jack has turned his room to a small science lab, which he experiments different liquid with a haste and distraught. Jenny arrives at his door, with lunch, but depressed Jack refuses the food and asks her to leave him alone. As Jenny tries to barge into the room, he pushes her, causing her to drop her expensive china. Provoked by Jack's action, she comes to her husband and complains about Jack and asks him to throw Jack out of the inn, due to the fact that he's a week behind his rent. Herbert barges into Jack's room with a bill in his hand and asks Jack to leave after paying his bill. Jack begs Herbert to leave him alone and tells him that due to a terrible accident his face and body is disfigured, and as soon as he undo his horrible accident, he will leave. But Herbert demands Jack to leave. Due to this, Jack turns hostile and throws Herbert out of his room. Herbert falls down the stairs and injures himself. His wife desperately screams for help, holding Herbert in her lap. The people in the inn see this and soon informs the police about the strange man and his violent behavior. Then the policeman inspects the inn and sees what Jack has caused. Jaffers, the policeman, pulls his baton and makes his way eagerly to Jack's room and asks him to leave with him to the police station calm and quietly, or he will be arrested and would be taken to custody by force. Jack angrily asks them to leave him alone, for one last time, threatening to show his real self, if not. But Jaffers doesn't take the threatening seriously. Annoyed by this, Jack starts revealing himself, starting with his fake nose, his goggles. Lastly, he removes the bandages on his face, revealing a hollow face. Jack starts laughing hysterically. This terrifies the policeman and the people around him, and they runs away. Jack proceeds to remove his clothes one by one. Unknowing what to do, Jaffers and a few men return to Jack's, only to find a shirt bouncing in the air, and Jack laughing devilishly. Conceited by his invisibility, he arrogantly swagger about how powerful he is. As Jaffers locked the door to stop Jack from leaving, Jack takes the window to leave the room. The policeman runs towards the window in order to catch him. He retreats, thinking that Jack has left the room through the window, but to his surprise Jack strangles Jaffers from behind and leaves him unconscious. Then he beats up the men guarding the door and leaves through the stairs, vandalizing the inn. He then proceeds to run away with a stolen bicycle, and jeopardizes the whole town with his inadequate pranks. Dr. Cranley and Kemp search the former working place of Jack Griffin to find any clue about his whereabouts or his project. They find an anonymous list of ingredients and chemical. The last one of that list is monograin. Dr. Cranley explains that it is a horrible and a rare drug extract from a flower in India, which has the property of withdrawing colors from any contact medium. Jack then enters his colleague, Kemp's house. Kemp is now sitting in his living room listening to the radio broadcast about an insane delusion among the people in a village, regarding an invisible man living among them. Kemp hears this and jots the connection, just as Jack shut down the radio. He then reveals his presence and moves a rocking chair and sits next to Kemp, explaining about his invisibility and asks Kemp for a pair of gloves, bandages and clothes. Then Jack enters one of the rooms to dress himself, forbidding Kemp to leave the house. He comes out full visible. He explains Kemp about his future plan. He forces Kemp to become his visible partner in a plot to dominate the world through a reign of terror, to gain more power that no one was ever able to. He also wants to use Kemp's house as a laboratory to find an antidote to his invisibility. Then Jack and Kemp goes back to the Lion Inn to bring Jack's books about the experiments, which he had to leave before, due to the commotion. Meanwhile, the chief detective arrives at the inn and gets annoyed with the townfolks. He strongly rejects the stories about the Invisible Man after a 10-mile search in the area. He accuses the inn owner for creating unsettled stories to generate publicity and business. Simultaneously, Jack walks to the room he spent the last week and throws his books out of the window. Kemp collects the books and waits in the car. As the detectives start to write on some papers, his inkstand starts to move around the table, startling the chief detective. Abruptly, the ink gets thrown on the detective's face. Cups and pictures flies off the wall, hitting the gathered police, informants and witnesses. Terrified, they runs out of the inn in a haste. Jack angrily attacks and kills the poor officer. And he runs away in Kemp's car to safety. At Kemp's home, Jack eats his supper. Jack explains that he should always stay out of sight for about 3 hours after a meal, as the food is still visible inside him until it gets digested. He then proceeds to explain Kemp that he could only work on clear days as the rain and fog make him visible again. After supper, Jack goes to bed, removing his head bandage and his shades. At the same time, in the inn, the chief policeman instructs his men to search the countryside for 20 miles in radius. The chief police officer then continues to clarify a search party of 1,000 men and 1,000 more volunteers will be dispatched to seek and capture the Invisible Man. At 10:30 p.m., a live radio broadcast about the Invisible Man and his dangerous actions. Police seek help from the public to capture this menacing man and promise a £1,000 reward to anyone who gives information, which leads to capture of the Invisible Man. At Kemp's house, while Jack is sleeping soundly in his bed, distressed and petrified, Kemp calls Dr. Cranley and tells about Jack's situation and pleads him to visit him now. But Cranley refuses Kemp and insists he will visit in the morning. This conversation was heard by Flora, and she insists his father to tell about Jack. No other way, Cranley tells her daughter everything he knows about Jack Griffins and warns about him. Despite Cranley's warnings, Flora joins him to go to Kemp's house to see Jack. After calling Cranley, Kemp calls the police and asks for help, telling that the Invisible Man is sleeping in his house. As soon as Cranley reaches Kemp's house, Flora hurries to meet Jack. He tells Flora that he did all of this to impress her, so that he can keep her happy forever with the help of the power, wealth and honor gained by his experiment. While they speak, the police surround Kemp's house to capture Jack. In order to deal with the police, Jack says goodbye to his beloved fiancée and promises to come back to her alive. Police link their arms and move forward. Jack confronts Kemp about his betrayal. As for revenge, he promises to kill Kemp the next day at 10 p.m. Horrified, Kemp asks for help, but before that Jack escapes. Violently insane, Jack attacks a search party and derails a train, which killed 100 innocent passengers. At Lloyd's Bank, he steals an employee's drawer and passes out cash to people on the street. Later, police clears a room with the help of a net. They plan to use Kemp as a bait, because he was threatened by Jack. Ignoring all the plans which police has established to keep Kemp safe from Jack, he decides to seek his own safety. He takes his car and drives far away from his home. Without knowing Jack is in the car with him, Jack pushes Kemp out of the car, ties him up and puts him back into the car. Then pushes the vehicle down a hill, which ends up exploding into flames. A snowstorm forces Jack to seek shelter in a nearby barn where he falls asleep. Later, a farmer enters and spots movement in the hay where Jack is sleeping. He quickly notifies the police, who rush out to the farm and surround the barn. They set fire to the building, which pushes Jack to come out from his hiding place, leaving visible a trail of footprints in the snow. The chief detective opens fire, mortally wounding Jack. He is taken to the hospital where, hours later, a surgeon informs Dr. Cranley that Jack is dying and wishes to see Flora. On his deathbed, Jack admits to Flora, "I meddled in things that man must leave alone." As he dies, his body quickly becomes visible again. So guys, what do you think about this video? Please comment down below, like and subscribe. Have a wonderful day.